Welcome to the Unabridged podcast. I'm Ashley.
And this is Jen.
Join us for bookish episodes and check out our website, unabridgedpod.com, where you can find lots of new bookish content to grow your TBR.
Sign up for our newsletter to find out more about online book discussions and upcoming events. Find us on Patreon for extra Unabridged content. Join us on Instagram and Facebook at unabridgedpod and message us there or see our website to get plugged into the Unabridged community. You want opinions about books? We've got them. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Unabridged. This is episode 310, Books About Animals. This is one of the categories in our Unabridged podcast reading challenge, or it could just be some fun book recommendations. Before we get started with that discussion, we're going to do our bookish check-in. Ashley, what are you reading?
One of the things I'm reading right now is Farah Roshan's Pugs and Kisses. I am loving this one. And in fact, this would work for this category as well, because certainly dogs are at the center of this story. But this is a really sweet one about veterinarian Evie Williams. First of all, I'm not going to spoil the opening scene, but the opening scene, I think this is something Roshan does really well. The opening scene is just shocking and kind of horrific, but in a funny way, sort of, in the way that terrible things are also kind of funny. That happens right at the beginning. So there's this big drama right at the beginning of the story with Evie. And from there, things unfold, but that event precipitates some changes in her life that, so things are kind of shaken up. And so she is trying to figure out some job things after that. And so she is a vet, but she's also like the place that she's been working, she's thinking about leaving because of the big drama that happens at the beginning. In the midst of that, goes back to this place that she had volunteered in the past, but hadn't been to in a long time. When she gets there to volunteer, she runs into Bryson Mitchell, who is somebody who has wound up being this like nationally or internationally recognized vet, a surgeon. When they had met each other was back at the volunteering years ago. It was like 8 years ago or something. They had been volunteering together, but he'd been away. He does all these speaking gigs and everything. So he had been gone for a long time. They're in New Orleans. He'd been gone for a long time. And so she is like shocked to see him. But when they parted, things had not parted well. And so she's quite ruffled to see him in this clinic. Well, it becomes apparent very quickly that the clinic where they had been volunteering is having a lot of trouble. And one of the things is that the program that they had volunteered with has fallen apart. A lot of the support that was coming in has collapsed. And so they're starting to discover, both of them, that this place that they really both feel indebted to because it really helped them become vets is having a lot of trouble. So things kind of evolve from there. But I mean, I am loving it. Lots of puppy love in this story and also second chance romance vibes. And so we'll see what happens. But yeah, so far so good and a lot of fun. And again, it's Farah Roshan's Pugs and Kisses.
Oh, that sounds so good. I love Roshan's work. I just feel like her romances never let me down. They're always just such a nice, not always easy, but yeah, just such a happy book to pick up.
Yeah, really fun. And I didn't realize this one is part of a series. It's Doggone Delightful. Is the name of the series. This is number 2. So I will go back, but I think it does not, I don't feel like I'm lost or anything. Yes. I imagine it's one that's like, touching characters, but very different storylines for each one. So I did not read book 1, but I am enjoying book 2.
Do you remember when we interviewed her and her little dog? So I'm like, this totally makes sense of it. She must be such a dog lover.
I'll have to link to that. Yeah, we did get to talk to Farah Roshan years ago, and she was lovely, and I forgot about her dog. That's so sweet. So yeah. What about you, Jen? What are you reading?
I am in the middle of Rashonda Tate's With Love from Harlem. I am listening to this one. And it is great so far. It is historical fiction. So it is about a woman named Hazel Scott who lived in Harlem and was a renowned kind of pianist and jazz prodigy who made her way into a career playing like the nightclub, jazz club circuit. So Billie Holiday really took her under her wing and helped her to get her start and pushed her toward greater fame. And she is now an adult, and her focus is really on her career. She is Black, so there are some barriers that she's facing. Because it's really amenable to Black musicians, Hazel has become quite famous. And she's performing one night, and she ends up meeting this politician, Adam Clayton Powell Jr., who just sort of sweeps her off her feet. He is married, and so she does try to resist a pull toward him for a little while. She does not resist overly hard. And they begin having an affair. And I guess this is a slight spoiler, but not really. It's in the synopsis. So I'm just going to go ahead and say they do end up getting married. And he is very pulled to civil rights issues, as Hazel is. She had taken some stands to protect other Black performers and to make sure that they were taken care of. She ends up doing a film at one point, and because of one of her stands that she took, other people are treated better than they would otherwise have been. So it's a cause she believes in, but it also becomes very clear, probably clear to the reader earlier than it is to her, that Adam expects her to sacrifice her career to support his. And he's really only interested in her career as a way to further his own goals and ambitions and to make use of her fame. So I'm doing this as a buddy read, and we're midway through the book. So that is where we left off, that I have a sense of dread. I have resisted Googling her because I want to know what the real story is, but I also assume that that is going to spoil things about her career and why I had never heard of her before, even though she is pretty well connected. So James Baldwin is in the book, Miles Davis is in the book, Billie Holiday, who I mentioned earlier. So she's definitely touching the lives of all of these names that I've heard of, all of these people that I've heard of, and yet I'd never heard of her. So we'll see what happens once I finish the book. I'm going to hop on Google and find out. I'm assuming she actually knew all of these people. It seems to be very well researched. And Harlem of 1943, that's when it starts, is very well drawn out. So I'm thinking Tate did a lot of research. So that is Rashonda Tate's With Love from Harlem.
Oh, wow. That sounds great, Jen. And yes, I haven't heard of her either. So I think it's interesting to learn whose story endures and not. And I love it when we get books like this that uncover someone that's gotten missed over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll be really interested to see how the second half goes. So, all right. Well, we are going to switch to our main discussion. Each of us is going to recommend a book about an animal that, if you're participating in the challenge, could help you to meet that category. So, Ashley, what would you like to recommend?
So I wanted to share Shelby Van Pelt's Remarkably Bright Creatures. I hesitated a little bit to pick this one because I worry that everyone who's listening might have read it, but I also think it is a great choice for this category. And if you have missed it, I wanted to share it. What makes this so fascinating as a story is that there is an octopus, Marcellus, who has a narrative voice in the story. And I think that piece is just brilliant and really fascinating. And it is so unique. That was really why it came to mind for me for this category, because there are lots of books that I have read that involve animals or animals are an integral part. And I've read ones where like a dog has a perspective before, but I think seeing a creature like an octopus, who we know that octopi are brilliant creatures, and yet we also don't understand a lot about them. And so I think seeing someone take that and what we know about them and then run with it in a really interesting way is like really cool. So in this, we have Tova. And Tova is an older woman who has had a lot of loss in her life. And she works at the aquarium where Marcellus is, and she cleans at night. And the first thing that we kind of discover is that Marcellus is prone to escaping his container. And the problem with that, of course, is that octopi can be without water for a period of time. So like they can actually get out of their containment if they're in aquariums. But of course, if he does that for very long, he's going to die. And so she will find him in all these places where he has gotten sort of stuck and he is running out of oxygen. And then she will rescue him and get him back into the saltwater where he needs to be in order to continue to live. And so through that arrangement, Tova and Marcellus develop this sort of understanding of each other. And from there, the story really unfolds. But again, it's centered on grief. It's centered on Tova, who has carried a grief. She lost her son many years prior, Eric. And that loss she has never healed from. And of course, it stays with you, but it also has been like unprocessed in a lot of ways and is still not fully understood at this point in the story. And then also she lost her husband more recently, and that was where she started working at the aquarium. And so she has all of this grief that she is carrying and then is navigating some changes that are coming in her life as well. And from there is a entire mystery, kind of, I would say, that unfolds. And it's a mystery about what happened with her son. It's a mystery about who our family is. And it is a mystery that also shows Marcellus's ability to understand the world around him in a way that is different than like human understanding. And it shows his desire and motivation to solve this mystery for Tova, who he has come to really care for and who he wants to help. And so it is just a brilliant story. It's sweet. I think that at the core, it is really about loss. It is about trying to heal. I mean, it's about processing in a lot of ways. Like, it's about looking back and then finding a way forward by finally dealing with what's in the past. And so I just loved it. I don't want to spoil anything. So I think there's a lot of layers that I'm not even beginning. Like, there's other characters involved that I think are really important to the story. But I think a lot of the joy for the reader is seeing all of it unfold and watching how at the center there's this really tender and unusual relationship between an octopus and a person. And then like from there, all these ripples happen that are just really fascinating and really beautiful. And so again, that is Shelby Van Pelt's Remarkably Bright Creatures. And if you have not had the pleasure of reading this, it is delightful. It is powerful, and I would highly recommend it. And again, I think it's a great one for this category because it's just so interesting. Of course, there is a lot of literary liberty taken with what Marcellus might be thinking and feeling, all of that. But it does make for such a rich and interesting story.
Oh, I love that book so much. And I will say the audio is such a great experience because Michael Urie, who is an actor, if you're familiar with him, you're probably picturing him right now, reads Marcellus. And he, I think, captures his voice absolutely perfectly. So that's a really fun book on audio.
Oh, fun. I read that one on my Kindle, so that's good to know. I was just thinking when I was looking over it this morning, it's been a couple of years since I read this one, and I was like, oh, I should reread it. So yeah, maybe I'll listen to the audio this time. Such a good story.
Oh, I think you would love it. Yeah, it's really good.
Very cool. What's your recommendation, Jen?
So I'm recommending Tanya James's The Tusk That Did the Damage. And structurally, it's actually kind of like Remarkably Bright Creatures. This one alternates between different points of view. This book has 3 points of view. So one of them is the elephant, who has many names, but the one that he's known by through most of the book is the gravedigger. And then there is the poacher and the filmmaker. So it is set in South India. And this is an area where there is a flourishing poaching and smuggling industry for elephant's ivory. And there are conservation efforts in play that, are political in some way. And so they are subject to some of the same manipulation and some of the same problems that many political efforts are. And what you see through these 3 different perspectives is kind of the complicated nature of this industry, but also the personal toll that it can take on people, but also on these animals. So the gravedigger was with his mother and his sister and had this wonderful, flourishing life until his mother was killed. And then he's taken by a group of people who basically rent out elephants for different things, for pulling carts, for transporting things, just because people want to ride an elephant. And so there is one man who works for this group who really understands him and really understands elephants and what they need. And though it does not make up for the grief that the gravedigger feels, he is at least well taken care of and feels a connection with this man. Then we shift over to the poacher, who is a teenager from a local village who has big dreams of going to college and making a difference for his family. But a series of tragedies within his family mean that he loses that opportunity. His older brother is a poacher and has been to prison because he was caught. And the older brother has always been the impulsive one. And so the whole family is constantly just trying to keep him out of trouble and to give him the support that he needs so that he can make better choices. So The younger brother, who is labeled the poacher, is pulled into his older brother's orbit partly because he's trying to care for him and he has to be around him in order to try to make a difference. The filmmaker is from America, and she and this guy she was in film school with have decided that they want to come and do a documentary about the ivory trade, about the elephants, just to see, what everything is happening. So they talk to local officials, they talk to local veterinarians, and they are trying to film elephants to show what is happening. And she has very particular ideas about everything that she wants to show, but they aren't always matching up with what her partner wants to show. And so she is constantly struggling to tell the best story and to home in on the elephant stories in a way that will show kind of their complexity. Like Marcellus and Remarkably Bright Creatures, they're very intelligent animals. And in some ways, that makes them harder to control because they're not just going to do, of course, they're huge, but also they're not just going to do what they're told to do. And there are periods of time when they are reacting because of hormones and because of emotions. It's called the must. I think you say it. I read this one, so I'm not sure about that pronunciation. But when they just sort of go wild, the trainer who works with the gravedigger is aware of this and puts structures into place. But for other animals that don't have people who understand them as well, that doesn't happen. And so basically, you've set up this sort of inevitable conflict. We know the gravedigger got his name for a reason. We know that the animals can hurt other people. We know that the poaching is a really big part of the society. And so inevitably, these three characters come into contact. I will say I thought I had figured out how everything was going to match up, and it did not match my expectations, which made me happy. So I think it's a really strong novel. In addition, I think, to just being a really great illuminating story of something that's still happening. And so I thought it was really well researched, but also a really captivating narrative. So that is Tanya James's The Tusk That Did the Damage.
Wow. I hadn't heard of that, Jen. It sounds really good.
I forget where I first saw it, and I picked it up on a Kindle deal, and I've had it on my Kindle forever. And this seemed like a perfect opportunity to read it. And fortunately, it worked out really well. I really enjoyed it. It's devastating in parts, but I think it's really well told.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. And I do think I didn't say about Marcellus, but it's very much about Remarkably Bright Creatures is also grappling with what it means when humans interact with the natural world and what should those parameters look like. And when we first meet Marcellus, he's definitely counting days in his captivity. So there is this idea of how he very much feels imprisoned. And again, of course, that is a personification of an animal's perspective, but we also have evidence that, a lot of animals do not like to be in captivity. And so there is that element that is questioning what that relationship should look like. Interesting.
Yeah, with this one, there are certain smells that the gravedigger associates with his mother's murder. And so you see the way that his elephants do have good memories. I know that's a cliche, but it's also true. And you see the way that it's a trauma response when he smells something related to that comes back. And then the way he reacts emotionally, as people do as well. But then, of course, when you're a gigantic elephant, you can do a lot of damage. So anyway, yeah, it was a great read. I enjoyed it. All right, so we're going to round out today's episode with our Lit Chat game. Today's question, Ashley, is, have you ever done something inspired by a book? What made you decide to do it? Did it live up to your expectations?
That is a great question. One that comes up for me, this was a favorite of mine the year that I read it, A Gentle Approach to Cleaning and Organizing. And this one, I think, just really helped me see the approach toward what can be very overwhelming as far as chores and like household management in a different light. And I think it really had an impact on me in the sense of like, I just took a lot away from it about like, there's nothing morally attached to cleaning. And I think I hadn't really realized how much, particularly women, I think are like deeply conditioned that like, if we're not good at it, then like that's shameful. And that there's some kind of right and wrong involved. And she really dispels all of that and just gives really practical approaches. There's like a whole section about ode to baskets. And it's like, baskets are your best friend. You know what I mean? A lot of times, like, people who are talking about house organization might say, don't get any more baskets. It's just making more mess. But, her approach is very much not like how to be perfect, but instead how to live your real life and also find a way to do these things that have to be done all the time. And she talks a lot about like, if we reset every day, then like the resetting is helping your future self, and you're going to be grateful the next day that you've done this and this. There were some parts that I felt didn't apply, but I also thought that just this entire attitude really shifted the way I saw household management, especially post having kids. And like my kids were pretty small still when I was reading this, and I'm trying to figure out not just my own management of stuff, but also like how to help them develop good habits around that. And so I really love that. And the reason it came to my mind is because right now I'm listening to Casey Davis's new book, Who Deserves Your Love? How to Create Boundaries to Start, Strengthen, or End Any Relationship. And again, very different topic, but very similar approach of just practical destigmatizing, getting away from morally right and wrong, but instead just saying like, okay, this is how relationships work. And these are things you can do within those confines to like make things work. So yeah, I would say yes, I have implemented things, and yes, they have been helpful. So maybe that's a weird choice, but that's what came to mind.
No, I think that sounds great. I remember when you talked about that the first time, I guess in that post on the blog, adding it to my list. But, my list is long. So maybe I need to like circle it back up to the top.
There you go. I mean, again, I listened to both, and I feel like the audiobook accommodates it being an audiobook. So, there's like if this is relevant, then great. And if not, skip ahead to blah, 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 so it's very accessible and they're short. But yeah, I just like her. I like her approach, and I think she's got some great tips. What about you, Jen? What is your thought in this?
So the one that pops into my head is also nonfiction. It is Shonda Rhimes' Year of Yes, How to Dance It Out, Stand in the Sun, and Be Your Own Person. And I am a risk-averse person. Change is really challenging for me. And I read this book at a time that a career opportunity opened up for me. And normally I would not have taken it, but because I was reading this book and because of my good friends like Ashley, I ended up taking it. And it turned out to be a really positive change. I was getting pretty burned out at my current position, and I just kept getting pulled back into these patterns. And I needed to make a definitive change in order to make my work-life balance, while never, ever perfect, better. And so, yeah, I think that Year of Yes is just about embracing opportunities that come your way. And while you certainly still have to consider their potential negative ramifications, that it is worth it to say yes and to see what happens. And Rhimes talks about some really big choices she makes, but she also talks about little choices. Like she's on her way to, I think, an award show, and one of her children asks her to play with her. And she said, normally I would say no because I was busy and I was on the way and I was in my big fancy clothes. But she said yes. And she said it didn't have to be yes for the rest of the evening, but that small yeses make a difference too. And so I just thought her approach took on those big yeses, but also small yeses that sometimes we don't make time for. So yeah, I really enjoyed that one. I listened to that one as well, which she reads. And that, of course, she's such a dynamic person. And so it was a great reading experience. So that is Shonda Rhimes' Year of Yes, How to Dance It Out, Stand in the Sun, and Be Your Own Person.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that book. Nice.
Yeah, it's such a good one. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. We hope that the Unabridged Podcast Reading Challenge is going well for you. If you want to find out more, you can look on our website, unabridgedpod.com. And we'll talk to you soon. Do you have comments or opinions about what you heard today? We'd love to hear them. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at unabridgedpod, or on the web at unabridgedpod.com for ways to support us. To get more involved, you can sign up for our newsletter, join a buddy read, or become an ambassador. Thanks for listening to Unabridged.